Hello, I'm Michael Eisner, head of the Walt Disney Company. When our Broadway musical Beauty and the Beast opened in New York City in April of 1994, we all felt we had accomplished something very special. Bringing live, quality, theatrical entertainment to the stage requires the talents and dedication of many creative people: writers, composers, actors, musicians, choreographers, team members, and crew. To all of them, we dedicate this video, which reveals the heroic, behind-the-scenes efforts that brought Beauty and the Beast to audiences worldwide.
Welcome to our behind-the-curtain discussion with some of the principal architects of the theatrical presentation of Disney's Beauty and the Beast. For the next few minutes, we hope to shed some light upon the very complex task of creating one of the largest, most spectacular theatrical productions to ever take the stage. From the beginning, everyone involved knew that theirs was an unprecedented assignment. Take an enormously successful animated movie and create a live theatrical experience that would meet the expectations of the world and at the same time establish the Walt Disney Company as a premier producer of live theater.
I think the biggest challenge in translating Beauty and the Beast from the animated film to the stage was really how to deal with the animated objects, the enchanted objects, a candelabra, a teapot, and a clock. Because the scale of them, they should be small, you know, and in the film they were little. And so that was the big stumbling block. And it was really Anne Hould-Ward, the costume designer, and Matt West, the choreographer, and myself, in a meeting one day, we were talking about the mythology of the film. And in the film, the enchantress comes to the castle and she places a spell on the castle, and everyone in the castle is immediately turned into objects. And we thought, what if we change that a little bit? What if, when she places the spell, that the human beings that are in the castle, the servants and all that, what if they slowly start transforming into objects as the petals fall off the rose? And when we hit upon this idea, we were all pretty excited because it really addressed the scale of the objects. And it also let it be a human story that Mrs. Potts wasn't a teapot, she was a mother who had a young child who had this affliction, and the affliction in this case is turning from human beings into objects. And it also gave Anne a design point to start designing from.
And that transformation was a daunting challenge, to be sure, and one given by none other than the chairman of the Walt Disney Company, Mr. Michael Eisner. Mr. Eisner believed that the time was right for the Walt Disney Company to bring its magic to Broadway, and that Beauty and the Beast was the ideal property to make the transition from screen to stage. Calling upon a core group of creative talent, the theatrical rendition of Disney's Beauty and the Beast began to take shape.
The characters, the fantasy principles transform through the show. They become more like objects progressively during the show. In Act 1, Lumiere has a wig which resembles the shape of a candle, but in Act 2, it actually, we've lost it. In Act 2, it has actually become a candle, although because he's still largely human, it has real hair attached to it also, which is Anne's concept that they should always retain a reminder that they were human beings and are still partly human beings, so there's real hair on here even though he's got a candle for a head.
Throughout, helping the characters to retain human qualities became a central element to the execution of the theatrical experience.
You know, when I first looked at the stuff, they were originally going to be latex heads, and then when we got into the preview performances, we realized that the actors only had one wig, and that was for when they were human. They actually had, like Lumiere had two latex candle heads. One was small and one was really tall, and actually was supposed to light up on the top. And we put all this stuff on him, and he had a drip that went down the center of his nose. And they put it on him, and you couldn't see the actor. So Anne said, well, let's put his wig on him instead for the first show. So we took the finale wigs, and we restyled them. And so all of a sudden the wigs were the focus point of the first act, because the wigs had to create the shapes and the ideas to bring the enchanted objects down to a human level, but then we knew in Act 2 that they were going to metamorphosize into the harder, larger objects and things. So it was that was a cool process, because then the wigs became very important to the first part of the show.
From the creation of the characters to the creation of the physical world in which they would live, the process was a collaborative one from the start.
When Rob and I, Rob Roth, the director, and I sat down to visualize and create the show from the very beginning, from the very, very, very first time we talked about how we were going to get from place to place, we wanted to do it cinematically rather than doing it like an old-fashioned musical where you go to blackout, the scenery changes, there's some music in between, and then the lights come up and you're on the scene. And the only time we decided to use a blackout was to make a statement about a scene and to give it a punch, give it some emphasis. And so that I think consequently there's only 2 or 3 blackouts entirely in the show. And so what we visualized was it's a thing called moving scenery a vista, which means that it moves before your eyes. So rather than totally taking the castle away, to go to the fireplace, the castle moves upstage and the swags move in and the columns change position and the fireplace and the chair coming on. And then by Natasha changing the lighting, we're instantly, the audience is transported to the fireplace. Rather than literally changing the entire set, we're giving a little bit of a credit to the audience. And one of the things that we talked a long time about is we tried to set it into a period, okay, that like it's late 1700s or it's the early 18th century. But the problem is that there's all these references, like the wardrobe sings, she has a moment where she sings part of an aria or a part of a moment from an opera that's from the late 19th century. And certainly in the movie, they took liberties with the period where the library is very ampere, the outside of Belle's bedroom is Gothic, you go down a hallway, it's very Rococo, you go down another hallway and into another room and it's very Baroque. And so we decided to play upon that and to just say that it was a fairy tale place. It's a fairy tale world. It's not reality. It's not specifically 18th century. And certainly some of the influences that we looked at were like the Fragonard and the Boucher and the Watteau paintings from that 18th century French world. And a lot of the detailing and a lot of the color palette comes from that world. Especially in the finale when we get to the end where it's the sun's coming up on the horizon and it's just this really lush pastel world with really hot accents of pink and lavender and teal. And it's very much supposed to be like the end of an opera or a ballet and have that feeling. And so all those things come together to create what's on the stage.
She doesn't quite fit in. She really is a funny girl. A beauty but a funny girl. She really is a funny girl. That
I particularly like to work extremely closely with the scenic designer because I think that creative process and sharing the intellect of it is number one exciting, and number two adds to the intelligence of the design. And therefore our research began kind of in two layers that were going together really, of determining what the real period silhouette was like, looking at the movie also, and then looking at a candelabra or a clock, and beginning to see in your imagination, how would someone turn into a clock? What would that person have looked like to begin with? Which was a very fun and challenging place to put your mind, design-wise.
Now don't get upset, but you've got something on your back.
What are you talking about? Oh! What is that?
It appears to be a winding handle of sorts.
Get it off me!
Everything had to be rewritten. New characters added all over the place. The feather duster, Babette, was just, you know, she was a walk-on in the movie. She's an entire three-dimensional character now. The relationship between Belle and the Beast became much more expanded. And that, for me, was one of the big opportunities, because I do believe in the movie we didn't get to spend enough time with them to believe that they could fall in love. And I had the opportunity with this stage musical to add more scenes between the two of them, to give them some sort of common bond, something that, you know, why on earth would these two like each other at all? And so I was able to find that in the musical that we just didn't have time to do in the screenplay.
Musically, when you come to see Beauty and the Beast, you're going to see very much the experience you had in the movie, but then there are 6 new songs integrated in, and these songs all come out of the score to the movie and then move into new places, each of them. It should feel both familiar and new at the same time. You know, one of the things I strove for in the new score, in the new part of the score, was to draw from the underscore of the movie so that it always felt familiar to people. And going into each of these songs, going into Maurice's song you hear, that's Maurice's theme in the movie, and then he sings, "No family ever saner, except one uncle who, well, maybe let that pass." And that's the intro before he sings, "No matter what you do, I'm on your side." But the important thing is coming in with that piece of material that feels like you've heard it before, like it's part of the movie, and then it opens up. The same thing occurs in Home. Same thing occurs in If I Can't Love Her, where I go, "Long ago I should have seen all the things I could have been. Careless and unthinking, I moved onward."
As an artist in the theater, we spend a great deal of time holding on to our stuff and caring for it and making it perfect, but in the end we have to give it away. We give it up to the audience, and that's our biggest hope, is that they would enjoy it.